So we all have our own very different experience and our own contribution to make. We know it works. It's not a risk, in that sense. It's just about now we need to commercialize it.
Welcome to the GOAT Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Cassinan. At GOAT, we define sustainability through the lens of intentionality, circularity, and community. With this framework, any problem can be solved. The stories that we share, the pioneers that we talk to, show us a different way to build the future we all want to have.
We're at a pivotal moment where nuclear is needed more than ever. Let's once and for all become a circular economy.
Waste is not cost neutral. Like, it always costs your business something. So if you can get rid of that, then that's good for business as well.
There's this dissonance. We talk a really good game about protecting the ocean, but the purchase decisions that we make don't match with our espoused values.
An ideal food system revolves around relationship. Where is my food coming from? Who's growing it? How is it being grown? And why does that matter?
Thanks for being here. Let's dive into the conversation. What fascinated you about the ocean? Like, what was the thing that got you interested in it? Because we'll get into kind of all the stories of your travels and everything, but it starts with kind of this curiosity of the ocean, right?
Yeah, well, you have to go a long way back for that. I've I know the camera makes me look like I'm, 25 years old, but I'm not. um, but I was always fascinated by the idea of kind of exploration and travel, like a lot of people are, especially when I was younger. And I used to love, I still love like all the kind of the authors, like the kind of what I would call the authors who really kind of would write about exploration. People like Jules Verne and people like that who were, all about exploration. And for me, the ocean was always this kind of quite mystical place where it's just so otherworldly, you know, and so vast as well. And so even when I was very young, I always had this kind of idea that I wanted to cross an ocean, like travel across an ocean to distant lands, that vibe. And so that was always with me. And um and I think, and then when I got older, as I got older, and more recently, it's also become apparent that not only is so much of the ocean still unexplored, but when we talk and we think about the impact of the ocean um, on our planet and on our lives, actually, it has a huge impact on us. In terms of it's where we get food from, but it's also has a massive impact on the climate that we face, and the weather patterns are all affected by oceans, and the weather patterns affect the oceans. And so I think, I'm kind of really intrigued as to just helping people to get out and explore it. So I was lucky. I got, when I was older, I had the opportunity to go and get on board a boat and go and sail around the world. Got hijacked by COVID as well, like yourself. But but it um but it's just sort of sparked off a a, a new journey for me, really, since COVID, to help people to go out and explore the ocean, to get closer to the ocean, to start kind of understanding what's going on. There are some amazing people, going out now doing expedition sailing trips, but combining that with science, which I think is really interesting and really important. There's Yachts for Science, for example, that exist to try and help people um, who have yachts, and get them to use those yachts for scientific purpose. And I think, we need to do a lot more work in this area. So there's a part of me which is still, that young kind of explorer, adventurer, like, tales of daring do out on the ocean. I just love that. Um, and then there's a part of me as well which says, there's a lot more ocean in the world than land. And so we need to understand it, and we need to be really conscious of the impact that we as humans are having on it, and making sure that we're taking responsibility for it.
Mm. What happened in that gap between actually sailing around the world and wanting to in a younger age? What was the gap for you? What did you end up doing before you sailed around the world?
It's a long gap, by the way. As I said, I'm not actually 25. Um, um, well, life kind of got in the way. Life got in the way. No, like, I mean, life happened. I was sailing. I was doing dinghy sailing and things when I was 17 or 18 years old, and but then I moved to London, started working in a commercial business, which eventually took me to Unilever. So I ended up working in this big consumer goods company, and I spent 20 years there. And but actually, it's relevant because um, my role at Unilever was very much about commercial strategy, business strategy, all about building brands, but also under the chairman at the time, Paul Polman, they had a real um, advocacy for how organizations, how commercial businesses could have a positive impact on the world around them, social and environmental. And 20 years at Unilever, that was kind of, I was kind of immersed in that whole idea that Paul was very much the champion of, and still is the champion of. So he's left Unilever, but of how business can be a force for good, you know. And so then I left Unilever, and when I left Unilever, I had that kind of moment of saying, I've always wanted to go and sail around the world, and then the opportunity came up to join the Clipper race, and I jumped at that. It was just a good life moment for me where I had the time, um, and the ability to go and join the Clipper race, which was a great. But um, I never understood. I never saw where it would take us. I mean, I didn't go on the Clipper race thinking, hey, maybe I'll end up co-founding an adventure sailing business, and then what has also led to Expedition Zero. But um, somewhere I was always very passionate about adventure sports generally. Also, whilst I was at Unilever, I got my pilot's license. I was very into flying. Let's not talk about environmentally friendly on that. Although I saw you did a podcast with was it Vectalis, the electric.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about flying, I mean, my I grew up, my dad's a pilot. And so there's like this, yes, you have this whole side of the industry where there's a lot of discussion around whether it's good or bad, but undeniably it is the easiest way to get from point A to point B across the world. And and there's innovation that takes to get there, but when you think about how long we've actually been flying in the air, it hasn't been that long. And so as we work to innovate that, I think that's going to be another frontier. But at the same time, like I got to fly when I was a little bit younger. Honestly, I don't know if I have the stomach for it, and that was the interesting part. But I went flying with one of my dad's friends, and we were flying in like a little 2-seater Cessna, and got to take off. And there's like this moment when you're flying up above where you do get this completely different perspective on land and sea. Like, lucky enough, grew up closer to California, and so we flew over the water a little bit, and it was just like looking at the world from a different perspective was beautiful. And they say that happens a lot for the people that go into space. Like when they go to space and they look back down on the planet, they can't see the world the same way ever again when they come back down. And I think that flying gives a little piece of that, and I love that it was a little side of adventure for you.
Empathize with that. A lot of people, I had my pilot's license for a long time, and used to take people flying often, and I always found it very therapeutic. It's that like movement into another sphere, where and I think, and it's very similar to sailing, but it's very similar. People who do diving, I'm not a diver, but people that dive or even snorkeling, they tell me it's kind of similar. I think that diving and flying are probably quite similar in that we kind of walk around on the earth and see everything in this kind of two dimensional in terms of like we're generally walking along the earth, and then suddenly you kind of put yourself in a different s- dimension, in the air or on a boat on the ocean, where suddenly you have a totally different perspective on priorities, on what's important, on the world around you. And yeah, I mean, I always found that to be very, very interesting.
I mean, when I remember we got everything just perfectly trimmed, and it was just you're just floating. The engine's running, but you're floating. You don't have to touch the instruments really. You're just there, and then you look around, and it's just like this wild feeling. Um, I remember that
That
very
that kind of
vividly.
levitation, just floating. Yeah, I really love that, and that is very similar. And actually, this is why I like sailing now, and I'm not going to say I prefer sailing. I mean, a lot of things are transferable. I mean, a boat is just a plane with the wings mounted in a different way. Sail is just a wing, or a wing is just a sail. As the co-founder of Wavy Sail tells me, David Mumman, he always said, "Yeah, Andrew, you always talk about like flying as if sailing was like flying, but it's actually, I think you'll find that sailing was invented first. So flying has copied sailing." Probably true. So, but there is this kind of, I like as well the ability to harness, just the kind of Earth's natural resources. I mean, if you're in a plane, although it sounds funny because you've got a diesel engine or engine like pulling you along, creating power, but it is true that you're creating lift, through the wings, and it's kind of your whole passage through the air, which is creates this magic, of propulsion. And I think that, and of course, when you're sailing, it's the same. But sailing is much more challenging because sailing, that wing, that sail, it's like an infinitely controllable. You can control the shape and the form. And I love that kind of artistry as well, of just getting the wind over that sail or that wing, and how you can create movement.
Well, I mean, the feeling when you trim a sail in, and you're literally you're playing with the direction of the wind, and you have the luff of the sail just perfect. There's something about that that's really incredible. I mean, I remember doing a lot of. I mean, I've done dinghy sailing for a lot of my life, and when you're on a reach and you're just cruising super fast, it's really interesting to feel how you can manipulate the boat just with like a little bit of turning and a little bit of sail adjustment. Like, it's incredible.
When you get it all set up perfectly, you have that perfect setup, and that's the same flying and sailing. That just you just know you're kind of really in touch with the aircraft or with the boat. When it's like you just have that moment of balance where it's like, okay, this is great, and you can take your hands off, and just everything just works on autopilot.
What was it like going to Big Boat? And then, really embarking on a journey around the world. I mean, what was that kind of process for you personally? Was it, I mean, I don't know. To me, it would be exciting, but it'd also be a little bit daunting because you always see like some of those really, really sketchy parts of the ocean where you're like, ooh, there's nothing out here. How'd you deal with that?
Huh. First of all, I think it was easy. I had an easy ride because I hadn't done any. I mean, I'd done dinghy sailing, then I'd done flying, but what I hadn't done is I hadn't done a lot of cruising. I hadn't, ever really been out sailing on a kind of typical family cruising sailboat. And what I noticed is, so from a sailing perspective, that meant everything was new. And But what is apparent, you know, those clipper yachts, they're, the 70-foot, 35-ton, 70-foot um, sailing vessel. And the people that really struggled were actually the people who had been out, they'd done a bit of family cruising, and they'd maybe done quite a lot of miles, but they'd probably done that on a 40-foot yacht. And they jump on board a clipper yacht and they're like, well, oh, well, it's fine. I'm a sailor. I already know how to do this. But, I mean, the winches are, everything is just scaled up. If you kind of double the size of a sail, you quadruple its power. So suddenly you're talking about quite a massive difference in terms of how careful you have to be, how you have to think with a real kind of safety mindset. And for me, that was like I didn't have any point of reference, right? So it was sure, we just kind of learned how to sail the yachts, but I found it quite exciting. But also, I found that quite terrifying. To be, before even we set out to sea, you start winding up. I don't know, the running backstays on these yachts, and you're talking about a line where it's wound up so tight. You've probably got 30 tons of braking strain on that. Like you can jump up and down. It's like jumping up and down on an iron bar. So then, sure, like you don't want to just whip that line off that winch because it'll tear your arm off. Like it's so one of the instructors told me, he said, don't think about this as a boat. Think about it as a factory floor, and everything will hurt you or kill you. So yeah, that's kind of, you know, good, interesting mindset. Then you think, okay, I'm not just jumping on a boat and going on a on a cruise around the bay. Um, Honestly, I don't think anything can prepare you for crossing an ocean. We did lots of training and we went up and down the Solent and everything. Everyone was great, and you think it's cool. Um, I got the spinnaker up, and that's pretty fun. But um, but it's very different. I do remember, the first time that I joined the yacht, and then we went out, and then and then you're offshore, and then the first day it's like, oh, this is kind of exciting, and then the second day you're like, hmm, it's quite okay. By the third or fourth day, you feel like, oh, like we're actually really far from civilization now, and I really like it, that transition, the vibe on the yacht. There was maybe 10 of us on the boat, quite a big crew, I would say, 10 or 12 people on the boat. But just how very quickly, in a couple of days, um, I didn't have any real fear, but what I did notice is that you very quickly, like that boat, that just becomes your whole universe. And I would say that the bit that really was telling was that we were sailing when COVID hit, you know, and we didn't have at that time a lot of communication with the outside world because it was satcoms, no Starlink or anything like that, and so it was I think I could have like a 200 character text I paid to be able to have on my phone. My wife starts sending me texts saying there's a virus. You're like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then she's like, people are dying, and you're like, okay. Like not the kind of information you really want to get when you're at sea, but and this is the thing for me, what I think is really telling and difficult actually for people on shore and difficult for people that don't sail is, what, like at that point you're in the middle of the ocean and there's 10 or 12 people on that boat, and frankly it doesn't really matter what happens in the rest of the world. The only people that matter to you at that moment are the 12 people that are on the boat, because they're the people that are responsible for your life and you're responsible for their life. And if you don't get that boat to a port somewhere, like nothing else really matters. And I mean, don't tell my wife that. She doesn't, she doesn't understand. But it's true. There's this kind of boat life that happens where it's just a little bubble. And I really like that. And I think it's very hard to explain that to people who haven't gone ocean sailing. It's one of the things that I love with Wavy Sail, that we send people on these. We have smaller groups. We only have 6 people on a boat, and there's a group that was out. They went from St Helena went from Cape Town to St Helena Island, and you just we get the blogs, we get daily blogs from the boat, and you just see people going through that movement into kind of that boat life mindset where kind of they're just in this different rhythm of life.
How do people, I mean, for people who don't sail, how do you manage the whole food, water? I mean, I think most people think like take as much as you can and then hopefully you'll make it across in time, and if not, everybody dies. Like what's the actual like process of provisioning a boat at that point?
So it's yeah, it's a good point. Two things. First of all, one of the things I found from sailing I did, maybe that, so obviously I went and was sailing, then we created Wavy Sail. So what happened was the skipper of the yacht I was on maybe I should just explain that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So what happened was I went sailing on the Clipper race, and Clipper is fantastic. They've introduced so many people to sailing. The skipper of the boat that I was on, Dave Immelman, who everyone calls Wavy, we were sailing together. I was part of the crew. Clipper's obviously non-professional crew, but the skippers are ultra professional, right? Because you've got these guys who are women and men who are responsible for all these non-professional sailors who've had sometimes like 4 weeks of training, and then they're pitched off into across the Pacific or down the South Atlantic. And I mean, it's that's a responsibility, right? So you want someone who really has been there and done it, like, and is able to take that kind of responsibility. So Dave Immelman is a skipper of the boat I was on for Clipper, and I mean he's done 600,000 miles of ocean sailing, and just kind of a million stories. We could do a whole podcast about the stories, you know, Dave stories. But he said to me, "Oh, when this is over, I think I'd like to set up a sailing school." And I, coming from my commercial background and business background, said, I don't really think the world needs another RYA sailing school. I'm a big fan of the RYA and giving people training. But honestly, there's lots of sailing schools. But this whole sense of adventure sailing just felt like there was a real need for it. And this is pre-COVID. And so we started talking about what would an adventure sailing business look like, and out of that we created Wavy Sail. And then the Clipper race got sort of stopped by COVID, and then we were all sat at home, and then we said, we should really do something with this Wavy Sail. And we created Wavy Sail in lockdown and started doing online masterclass with Wavy. That's how we started the business. And then when the lockdown lifted, we started the actual business of taking people sailing. And it's always like very small groups on hands-on sailing adventures with the world's most experienced skippers. That's how we built Wavy Sail. And all the skippers that we work with have got more than 500,000 miles of ocean sailing, which is quite a benchmark.
I mean, I don't think a lot of people have driven 500,000 miles in a car. Like like when you think about how that volume of distance, that's almost more time on a boat than it is on land for most people.
Yeah, there's not many people, honestly, that hit the mileage requirements, and it happens quite a lot. We get a lot of people who phone and say, "Hey, like, I'd love to be a skipper for Wavy Sail," and we're like, "Yeah, sure." Like, so 500,000 miles and at least a circumnavigation, and then most people are like, "Well, that's like crazy." And but um, but the truth is that it's really important. Actually, the mileage is important, but what's more important is the breadth of experience that those skippers have got. And I have to say, what we don't say in our marketing so much, but of course, what's actually really important is their ability to lead and transfer their kind of passion for the ocean. I mean, if you've sailed 500,000 miles, hopefully you actually really love sailing, because you know you'd be pretty crazy if you if you'd done that much sailing and you actually didn't like it. So these guys are really passionate about the ocean, um, and I've loved, and there's, they're really I find it inspiring to sail with them. So we're very lucky, with the skippers that we have, and um, and so that's how we kind of create our trips around the skippers, around them. To go to your question in terms of one of the things that we try to do is that I always notice that a lot of the people that will come sailing with us, they'll typically be solo travelers. A lot of people, we always get asked that, like, I'm a solo traveler, but is it okay, if I come sailing on my own? I'm like, 90% of the people that come sailing with us are solo travelers. And the reason is because husband and wife, or, partner, if you both love sailing, probably they're going to go and buy a boat, or they're sailing together. But what you'll find is one person loves sailing and the other person is a bit like, you know, sailing across an ocean, I'm not sure. So those people come sailing with us. But what we realized was that often that means that there's family, friends, partners, whatever. And it's really important that they're also involved in this passage. If you go off for like 50 days on a sailing trip, your friends and family, at minimum, hopefully they're a bit worried about, like, okay, where are you? What are you doing? Are you safe? Are you happy? But more positively, they're probably thinking all these questions, like, by the way, like, what are they eating? What's going on? What does boat life look like? So we do this daily blog backwards and forwards from the boat, where we get one person on the crew writes a daily blog. They send it back to the shore support person that we have for each trip. We have a dedicated shore person, and they will um, cascade that blog out to all the supporters. We have 6 people on our trips max. We'll have 150 supporters typically on a following that boat. And what that means is that we send the blog back to all those 150 people. They sometimes write messages, and then we forward the message onto the boat. And you get this very nice exchange going on, where actually all the supporters feel very much involved in the passage. And in fact, we've even had people, one person even wrote, I love that they wrote a review on TripAdvisor and said this was the best holiday they'd ever been on. So, like, we went, and I've explored St. Helena Island, and it was amazing. I just got involved in this whole, the whole boat life. It was incredible. I was actually a supporter. I never even went on the boat. A testament, I think, to how, you know, like, nothing will match going sailing if it's your thing. Going out across the ocean. Honestly, I mean, if you can do it, do it. If you're inspired by travel and adventure, it's really a challenging but also amazing experience. But for lots of people as well, who maybe they wouldn't want to go sailing, maybe, I always say sailing is like camping, but on a moving field. So, some people don't like camping and some people don't like movement, and it's like, well, okay, camping in the rain, on a moving field is sort of like, have to think about it. Some people think that's cool. Some people like, that's the worst thing ever. But even those people, they will still get a huge amount out of following along with someone they love or who's a friend of theirs, having that experience and just the emotional kind of ups and downs and everything. We don't filter or edit the blogs. Sometimes I have to say I'm a bit, you know, when we've been becalmed for 2 days and the crew are kind of getting really kind of having an argument about someone who didn't wash up a cup or something, you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't post this, but we're like, no, this is like the real experience. There are downs and there are ups.
What's kind of the rhythm of a day? I mean, yeah, the obviously the food and water thing, but also, what's kind of everybody's, I think when most people think they're going to go on a sailing trip, they kind of think they're going to be sun tanning on the deck. Obviously, that's not what it is. So what is it? What's kind of the
Yeah.
real experience?
I mean, to be fair, we have different types of trips. So we grade our trips. We have um, relaxing, stretching, and epic voyages. So probably you can imagine there's a little difference there. The relaxing trips, like a week in Croatia with Guy Waits, who just finished the Golden Globe race. Right? So, I mean, it's still hands-on sailing. It's still very, practical. We're not kind of drifting around drinking gin and tonics. We're doing real sailing, but it's in Croatia, right? So it's it's pretty relaxing, which is very different than if you go and you do the Cape Town to St Helena. As I said, it's 4,500 miles on a 50-foot boat with six people. It's quite an interest. It's quite a different rhythm. Um, I would say that there's a balance of some days you get into this rhythm of watch systems, of course, where you have the watch keeping. So you're on watch for 4 or 5 hours and off watch, which means you get used to going to sleep in the middle of the day or waking up and it's 3 in the morning, and just that very different, of course, but and there's for me, I always think there's beauty in all of it. It's 3 o'clock in the morning is a pretty horrendous time to wake up, but it's pretty epic when you get out on deck and and you have this amazing stars, and you're just kind of sailing by the light of the moon. I mean, it's and just kind of magical. But then you'll also have and you'll have days where it's great, and we'll have whales. Actually, the crew just sent me something they took a film. I should show it to you. Like where they were sailing on, and a whale came and like breached literally, I don't know, like 50 foot away from the boat. Amazing, like right out of the water. Just an incredible sight. Because stuff like that is going to live with you forever. Um, but then you'll also have storms and changing sails and reefing, in the night. Like, can be pretty hectic. So it's very changeable, and I think you've got to be adaptable and like that. That it could be howling gale, it can be pouring rain, it can be beautiful sun, it can be there's like sunsets and dolphins are what everyone shows you, and there is that. But then there's whole range of other kind of experiences to live on a boat.
What does that do for the person who, they would like? I would imagine you get the very unique experience of seeing the before and after of people when they first get on the boat and then people when they depart the boat afterwards. Is there a big difference?
Yeah, totally. And I think actually the place where I see that most, if I can talk about one of we so wavy sail, what we do, said small groups, big hands-on sailing adventures with the world's most experienced skippers, but that's kind of what we do. Then there's the two pillars of how we do things, which have which we'll talk about Expedition Zero in a moment, but are that we wanted to make sailing more inclusive, and we wanted it to be done in an environmentally responsible way. So we have a social and an environmental mission for Wavy Sail. To be fair, we don't talk about it a lot. Everyone, I think we might need to just redo our website, because I feel like we don't really talk about this enough, but it's really important. When ever since we started Wavy Sail, that was always really key for me and for Dave, who's the co-founder with me, that we wanted to encourage more people to come sailing, and get away from some of the stereotypes of it all being about super fit kind of guys getting water thrown in their face, and be like, what, this is really for everyone. And then we'll talk about the environmental piece as well, which is fundamental. But so we created this Open Oceans grant fund, and Open Oceans is a fund we created that gives free, fully funded places on our trips to people that wouldn't have the means to join one of our trips, or wouldn't have the confidence for whatever reason. So it's very broad, and it's a simple application form, and we dedicate at least one place on each of our trips will be an open oceans funded place. It's funded effectively by us, sometimes with a partner who contributes. And to your question, I think seeing those open oceans recipients, when you see when they get on the boat and when you see when they get off the boat, it's like dramatic. We had, and he wouldn't mind me saying this, Johan was the first recipient of the Open Oceans grant, and that was in one of our Scottish trips last year in Oban. And he'd always been very passionate, like had that kind of explorer mindset, but was a long-term was caring for his family, and therefore was kind of stuck at home, and actually didn't get to go out very much. And anyway, he got um, the first Open Oceans granted place. So he came on the Scottish trip, and I met him on the day we went on the Scottish trip, and I'd obviously spoken to him quite a lot beforehand, and he was kind of super excited about the trip, but was also really worried about, well, I'm leaving home and I haven't been out. He hadn't been out of London for 20 years. He was living in London, barely been out of the house really. Always looking after. He was caring for his parents actually, and throughout the 10 days that he was on that Scottish trip, it honestly, like, you just saw this kind of evolution where he just opened up. It was really amazing. He just, started talking and being much more kind of conversational with everyone, was like really into the sailing, had like never done any sailing. And by the end was, helming honestly like a professional skipper. It was pretty amazing. Um, it was incredible. And he said that it was the most life affirming thing that he had ever done. And honestly, I mean, even as I sit here, I feel quite emotional about it. But like, that's where from my perspective, I just was like, this open oceans fun, we have to roll this out and do more of this, because sailing can be so life changing and positive for many people, but especially for people who, just for whatever reason wouldn't normally have the ability to join a trip like that. And so I'm very excited that, and I have a guy just about to join our trip in St. Helena as well. And he's going to sail back all the way to, a young guy who really wants to get into be a professional sailor, but again has not really had the opportunity to do so, to get access to a vessel. And I'm really excited to see kind of how he how he fares over the next 2 or 3 weeks as he sails back with us from St. Helena to Cape Town. It's going to be, but I think we'll see the same. I think it'll change that person, which is in a very positive way. Hopefully in a positive way.
That's incredible. Seriously. I mean, that what you guys are doing is fundamentally important, just for people. I mean, regardless of the entire environmental side that you guys are doing, but the social side is so important because I think sailing has always had this. I mean, because it very much earned it. It was very exclusive. The ability to even own a boat, for example, 1% most of the time, unless you're getting like a 40-year-old, 50-year-old boat. And so the access to sailing has always been very, very minimal and very elitist. And I think people are like, oh, well, you're part of the yacht club, or are you not? And that's kind of the perception that goes with sailing. And I think that anybody that's truly gone sailing with, some sailors that aren't part of the yacht club, it's just a community of people that just want to go out and enjoy the ocean and go explore something. And I love your approach to it because it really opens the door for people to experience something truly transformational.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope so. And the challenge, of course, is, well, we always set up the business, said we wanted it to be small groups, and I think there is a very different vibe that happens when you're 6 people on a boat than if you're 12 or 15. Because I mean, it's six crew, and then we'll have a skipper. So you might, or maybe a first mate on someone. So you might be, 7 or 8 people on board, and maximum. And it's a very different vibe, because in a small group, you really, really do feel that your interdependencies. You know, like, if we go out sailing, I know that I'll be on the boat, at night. If you come up on deck without your life jacket on, I'm being like, Steve, you need to put your life jacket on. Not because I'm trying to, but because I'm genuinely like, if you go over the side, that's my responsibility. I mean, it's your responsibility, but it's also my responsibility. And there aren't many things that we do in life where we're genuinely kind of responsible for people who are perhaps, have come together as strangers, actually. You know, but you very quickly become very, very close, because you're genuinely responsible for each other. And I think that's a very good thing to kind of experience. Plus, of course, you get all of the confidence that just comes from, as I said, sailing and navigating from A to B, and finding St. Helena Island in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. It's a pretty small place. It's an achievement.
I guess I wonder why do you think it has to take, an experience like that to care for one another? I think, maybe it could be just the society that we live in now, but I feel like the experience you're talking about out on the water, where you're genuinely just like, hey, you're my responsibility. I want to make sure that you're safe, but you're responsible also for me. Why does that have to only happen on a boat? Like, what did it change your perspective just in the community when you are on land?
Yeah. So first of all, I think it carries forward when you get back on land. I can talk a bit about that in a moment. But one of the things that helps is the removal of distractions. So, as I said, life on a boat is actually super simple. It's like, sail the boat from A to B without hurting yourself or anyone else. I mean, that's it. Like, that's that's everything. That's all that matters. So, um, sail safely, basically, and nothing, everything else is really superfluous. So it means that everyone is very focused on a very simple thing, which is, we've all got to work together, and we've got to get the boat from A to B. If the boat doesn't get to, you know a port, guys, like, we're at sea, and one day we will run out of food and water, like, so you need to get somewhere. um so you have this big sense of self-sufficiency, and you don't have a lot of distractions. We don't have phones, we don't have social media, we don't have any of those things. We don't have lots of other kind of calls on our time either. And so you kind of, you just lead this very simple, kind of almost nomadic life, which I think is, it's much easier to kind of get in touch with the relationship with other people.
I've heard that when you get back on land after a significant time at sea, that everything is weirdly extremely fast. Did you have that experience?
Well, yes, yes, but I think more importantly, the thing that I learned, and actually I think was from doing that clipper race originally, um, was, we the race got stopped by COVID. So I ended up, we got stopped in the Philippines. We ended up getting the last flight from the Philippines, and flying back to the UK the day before lockdown in the UK. And then I was on phone calls, during COVID, where all these people, I came from a business background, and I had this kind of business network, and everyone was on these business calls, kind of, talking about COVID and what it meant for them. and everyone was always super positive, like, let's, like, it's great, I mean, COVID's hit, but it's fine. I'm working from home, and it's cool. And the thing that I'd learned on the boat was it like the sailing make it, I kind of say, like, everyone is naked on a boat, which again kind of scares my wife. She doesn't know, like, no, not like actually. Sometimes. No, no. So, like, but you're stripped. You cannot live in that environment with a mask, right? So what happens is you become very okay with just being kind of you. So you become very okay with, having a good day, and you become very okay with, actually, today I'm having a bad day. And everyone else on the boat is very accepting of, hey, Andrew's having a bad day, and someone's going to come and make you a cup of tea and be like, hey, Andrew, listen, don't sweat it, whatever, for whatever small things can happen that, affect our mood. You don't go around saying, I'm fine, like, it's great, I'm super happy. Like, if you're not, you just be like, I'm not happy. And I think that's very liberating. And when I brought that back, funnily enough, it was very relevant when I came to COVID, like, to live in, like, in that lockdown COVID world. Because I said to people, you know, we're all on this phone call. There's like 50 people on this call, and it's all like, yeah, everything's great, everything's fine. I was like, it's genuinely not fine. At least half of us woke up today thinking, I don't know what the rest of my life is going to look like. So, it's better to, and actually that's fine. Just be like, that's fine. And then people can help you. And I think that has stayed with me. That's one of the things that sailing has taught me. It's like, you know, don't go to don't put on a suit and a mask, and it's just superfluous. Just be you. And actually it enables other people to help you. It enables you to inspire people when you're feeling good, and it enables people to help you when you need help.
Mm. I think that's such a good message because I think oftentimes we're way too caught up in whatever the next goal or the next thing or the to-do list that you have to accomplish that day, and that hecticness and the stress that goes with it. And my God, that car just literally won't go through the stoplight. Like, just the little things that for some reason irk us very easily.
Yeah, the little things, but also actually the big things. I think that, and maybe when now it's very relevant. I mean, with what we're now doing with Expedition Zero, honestly, I would never have had the confidence to kind of build what we're now doing with Expedition Zero. It's pretty big, in terms of what we're trying to do. And I think, um, if I had been younger, like pre-sailing, I would have been all wrapped up in, like, well, what if it doesn't work? What if I fail? What if, what will people think about me? And now I'm just like, you know what? Like, we just need to tackle this. Like, there's an issue here. So, we're going to get a bunch of people together, talented people and skilled people, and try and tackle what for me is a genuine issue, which is, the environmental impact of sailing. And you know what? Like, we'll see where we get to with it. I mean, that for me is the liberation of saying, I'm not going to get hung up on what people think, or, like, whether they think we should do it in a different way. It's in the end, this is the important, element now of just us kind of, um, having the confidence to get on with things.
Hmm. And so I think, I mean, I get to grow up kind of a little bit around boats and boating. And one of the things that you find is that the way boats are made, most people have no idea. They don't know the amount of fiberglass. They don't know that there's a lead bulb actually in the bottom. Like, there's a whole lot of things that people don't know about boat construction. But more so, what fascinated me about our first conversation that we got to have together was the amount of boats that honestly are just kind of wasted, to be honest. So tell me about just where Expedition Zero came from. So you have Wavy Sail take people around the world. You guys got some boats to be able to do that with, and then another chapter comes about.
Yeah. So wavy sail is always, we've always chartered yachts up to now. We've been growing the business very organically, and it's great, and it's doing well. Um, but at one point, we said, actually, we're going to need to probably we need to get access to expedition sailing yacht. We need to buy a yacht, or we need to have access to do the kind of trips that we want to do. And it's very hard actually to find the right kind of vessel for adventure sailing. You need a category zero boat, and owning a boat like that is, frankly, is kind of a headache from day one to day. Yeah, like they say, there's two good days on a boat: the day you buy it, the day you sell it. I've heard people say, like, I own a boat. It's like maintenance in exotic locations. If you're running a commercial business and you're trying to run expedition sailing, you know the kind of boats that you have access to are probably pretty old. They probably weren't actually designed for commercial sailing, like adventure sailing. Probably not. And if you own it, you'll just spend half your life worrying about maintenance. That's one side. Other side is pretty much none of the boats that you will have access to will have been built with any real regard to their environmental impact. That's the nature of boating. And what I mean by that is, first of all, in operation. So we go out sailing, and as Wavy said, we started measuring. We like, what is the environmental impact of sailing? It's great when the sails are up, but
You
but
don't always have wind.
you don't always have wind. Anyway, you know, people want to charge their phones or their cameras, or we need the electricity. Pretty much that's going to be with a whacking great diesel engine stuck in the bottom of that boat. And again, this is one of the differences between your little family cruiser, where that's probably a really small boat, might even be an outboard, in a 70-foot, 35-ton yacht. That's a 100 HP hook, like that's a truck engine. And that might be running 48 hours, 24 hours, propelling the boat. So we calculated the carbon footprint of a 10-day sailing trip, and it's like more than a ton of CO2 emission. That's the first thing. That's like a small family-sized car's CO2 emission for a year. It's pretty high. So that didn't feel good. But then, as you say, then we started looking at the build materials of these vessels. If you build a boat in GRP fiberglass, I mean, it's 100% like chemical. It's very high impact in production, and there's there's nothing you can do with that boat at the end of its life. These vessels have a long life, 40, 50 years maybe, but still, at the end, you can't recycle that boat. You can't recycle fiberglass, or if you can, but it doesn't have any commercial value, and therefore there's no real incentive to do it. And as a result, there's 24,000 abandoned yachts in Europe alone.
Just in Europe.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's the estimate, right? So not all massive yachts, but small, big. And as we talked about last time, intuitively, actually, it. If you go to any beach, go take a walk along any shoreline, I guarantee you'll see a yacht pulled up on the beach somewhere. Just right. Yeah, we love it. Like, we go and we take romantic, nostalgic pictures of them in black and white and stuff. And it's like, oh, look, it's really nice. But that's an environmental disaster. You know, that boat's just sitting there. What's going to happen to it? Like, it's get landfilled or something. I mean, it's not great. So the whole ecosystem, like the end-to-end life cycle of yachts, is not very sustainable. And look, there's loads and loads of companies that, and people who recognize that in the industry. I'm not kind of, some kind of standing on my own pointing fingers. I applaud everyone who's doing innovation, who is thinking about this challenge and how we might tackle it. But the fact is, we have not cracked it today. And this is what led us to Expedition Zero, because in the end, Wavy Sail as an operator, we were like, I want to use an expedition. I need an expedition sailing yacht. I want a net zero yacht. I want a yacht which is built for expedition sailing, but I also want a yacht which which is recyclable. I want a yacht which did not, take gigawatts of energy to be produced. I want a yacht where I can operate the yacht without having an impact on the planet. Bear in mind, we're taking people up into the Arctic, into these fragile ecosystems, and it's just irresponsible to take people into those kind of ecosystems, and burn 1,000 liters of diesel doing it. It just, it's not right. So we created Expedition Zero, totally separate business from Wavy Sail, to design and build a fleet of the world's first truly net zero expedition sailing vessels. And we, instead of it just being building one vessel for Wavy Sail, we were like, we need to take leadership and try and move our industry, our sector, into a lower environmental impact space. And so Expedition Zero will design, build these vessels, and lease them to sailing operators. And, the plan is to build at least 20 vessels over the next 5 years. That will be the world's biggest fleet of adventure sailing vessels.
What does it look like to try and tackle that problem then? Because I don't know, you have the way of actually constructing a boat, then you have the performance, then expedition sailing is very different than harbor sailing or, out to the mile marker buoy and back. And you have a whole other set of performance needs that it has to be resilient in a crazy storm. How do you construct a boat like that?
So it's all about collaboration. It's all around partnership. It's not me in my garage building this boat. We're pleased to know. So we're very lucky. We started building, or we started with the idea. We started looking around, as you can imagine. So we started looking. I want a sustainable sailing vessel. It's a good shopping list. And we started talking to partners, and we were very fortunate. We met up with Norbert and Marion Koch, who run Innovation Yachts. They have spent the last 13 years developing new materials and new construction techniques to create a building material for yachts and design sailing yachts which are truly zero impact. So using a natural based fiber, kind of mineral fiber. It's not, a lot of people talk about volcanic fiber, but it's not, because you can't really use volcanic fiber as 100% build material. You have to mix it so that you end up 5% volcanic fiber and 95% something which isn't very sustainable, which is kind of not really the objective. The new material that they've developed is 100% natural. It is 100% kind of that mineral fiber. It's created by melting volcanic rock at 12,000 degrees centigrade. That doesn't feel like that would be very sustainable. But they have got this induction oven, which is powered by solar. I think it takes like 3 weeks to heat the oven up through solar power. But it's purely natural derived energy. And using that, they melt this rock, they extrude it, they weave that into a material that they can then use to build yachts. And they make that material to a balsa core. So this is a huge amount of innovation that has been going on in materials that innovation yachts have been really pioneering. And last year they won an award, Sustainable Ocean Award, for their work in this kind of in this space. They've actually built a 60-foot IMOCA, which is a kind of racing yacht, out of the material. So it's proven. And we started talking to them just at the time when they were like, we built one yacht, but we really want to try and commercialize this and scale it. And we kind of came along and said, we think like the world needs about 25 expedition sailing yachts. And so they've got the knowledge and the expertise in terms of materials, and we're now working with them on, commercializing that. And so it's a really great partnership. In terms of the design, I mean, the good thing about this material is it's actually lighter than a lot of the other materials that we could otherwise use. So it's lighter even than fiberglass, but it's stronger than fiberglass. You can whack it with a hammer, even a sledgehammer, and it won't crack or craze. I mean, it's like rock.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So it's
That's
lightweight and incredibly strong, which makes it a really good material for the kind of sailing we want to do. And our benchmark, because you've got to set a benchmark and say, well, if we're going to build a yacht that is going to get used for adventure sailing, safety is the number one. It's like, safety comes before everything. So this material is really lightweight. It's really strong. It's fantastic, therefore, for us, what we want to do in terms of building an adventure sailing yacht. And the ultimate test is to go and take it into the Arctic. So our first passage with the first boat is, we said we want to sail it through the Northwest Passage. That's what we're going to do with it.
And what is the Northwest Passage for those that don't know what that is? I mean, Northwest and Passage, but what is the actual route?
Yeah, so the Northwest Passage goes from Nome to Nuuk. So that's from Greenland to Alaska. And you're effectively going from the Atlantic to the Pacific, but through the Arctic Circle, over the top of Canada. And it's it's only about 900 miles. It's not that long, like as the crow flies, but we'll end up probably doing about 2,500 miles by the time you sailed, because it's quite a tortuous route. There's only about 200 sailing vessels that have sailed through it ever. It was only opened, just over 100 years ago. So it's really kind of the ultimate sailing passage. Sadly, I would say it's becoming more accessible due to climate change. So there's less ice. But nevertheless, I mean, it's still a pretty epic challenge. You're going right up north. Obviously, you've got extremes of temperature. You've got ice floating around, growlers, we can call them, that can, could be damaging if you hit them. It's kind of the ultimate expedition sailing. So we really felt like that was the benchmark. If I can take an Expedition Zero yacht through the Northwest Passage, you can take an Expedition Zero yacht anywhere.
I love that you're taking on the harder challenge to prove of a new thing. It's awesome. I mean, to think about, just the material's fascinating. Like thinking about the material as like the whole of the boat. One, personally, I think it's going to be really cool looking for sure. But also, actually functional. How does it, I guess, how do you start to integrate that with the rest of the system? Like the sail itself and.
Yeah. So so we are doing it in phases. We're not actually taking it all in one go. There are two pieces of work going on. First is designing the ultimate expedition sailing vessel. Ultimate, I mean, is also about functionality, right? So we've been running Wavy Sail for 4 or 5 years. We work with all these skippers who've got hundreds of thousands of miles of ocean sailing experience. They've been running expedition sailing trips, you know, like I think, there's probably 2.5 million miles or something of experience. Crazy. So we sat down with them and said, if you had a blank sheet of paper, for one moment, forget about the sustainability. If you had a blank sheet of paper, what would an adventure sailing vessel look like? How many people would it have on board? Would it be bunks? Would it be cabins? What would the layout be? What would the services be? What All those things. Design a yacht for commercial adventure sailing. And the funny thing is, I actually don't think that's really been done up to now. There are some very specialist fleets like Clipper, but that's for racing, really. It's not really for the kind of adventure sailing that we see taking off around the world. So that was interesting. So we've got this design of the boat. And then let's talk about the sustainability piece. How do we make it net zero in operation? Well, we need to look at electric. We need to look, so zero fossil fuel, no gas, no diesel. And immediately that is also beneficial, by the way, because again, any sailor, but also if you're a commercial operator, you've got people coming on your boat, and it's like, how many times do we tell people, just guys, remember, like, switch the gas off, because a gas leak on a boat is really not good, right? Like that's really, that's really kind of critical. But because people are in a different environment, they're not sailors, they might be stressed, they might be tired. You've always got these kind of things. It's actually a safety consideration. So he's like, well, actually, you know what? Zero gas on a boat would be pretty cool. Like, that would make me sleep better at night as an operator, let alone that it's fossil fuel free. So fossil fuel free, electric propulsion. Then we need to look at batteries. A lot of the technology exists. There's huge advances in propulsion and in battery technology. So we're kind of taking the best of that and putting that into a vessel, as I said, though, with this really high benchmark, which is, we're going up into the Arctic Circle here. So, I mean, that's probably the highest and hardest operational challenge you're ever going to get. And that's the right benchmark. Because if we can make it work there, as I said, we can make it work anywhere. So we take that design, we've got the layout, we know what it wants to look like, we know the technology we want on board. We can start to design our vessel. If we build the entire vessel in this new mineral fiber, first of all, we'll have a massive weight advantage compared to a glass fiber or steel yacht, which of course will give us a lot more capability in terms of, you know, propulsion that we need, those kind of things. Um, but in some ways to set the challenge a little bit harder, but also to make it, there's a kind of risk and element to this, which is how we manage risk. The first prototype that we're building, we're actually taking one of those 24,000 abandoned yachts. We're going to that, which is already designed and coded, so we know that it's a solid structure that has already sailed around the world, but it's built in steel. But you know what? If we left it, it would just rust away on a dockyard somewhere. I mean, it's pretty much abandoned. Strip that yacht out to the bare hull, and then build the entire interior in this volcanic fiber or mineral fiber. Put all the services on board that we want. So we build effectively the Expedition Zero yacht, what we call an explorer class yacht. Actually, it's a new class of design of yacht that we've designed in every other way apart from the fact that it's steel hulled. That's lower risk because I don't, authorities coding, they were like, okay, I know this is a known design, so that helps us. But it, by the way, sets the bar even higher because I'm like, okay, with a steel hulled yacht, we're probably 30% heavier than we would be if we built this yacht in mineral fiber. I've got an electrical system that can cope with that. It's definitely going to cope when we build this yacht in mineral fiber, and it's going to be lighter.
I love that your approach to design is really focused on not not leading with sustainability, but rather leading with function, because I think that's what a lot of people lose when they try and design a sustainable solution. They go with the sustainable option, but they don't necessarily think of the function. And then that solution doesn't necessarily stick because it's not actually solving the problem. And I think that when you take the design more in a circular fashion of, you put the user at the forefront and you say, okay, let's design a product that's going to fit this user need. All the needs are met. Now let's engineer into that system what is a better way that we can actually construct it. I think you make a better solution at the end of the day.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And one of the things I learned through my work, pre-sailing, has always been that you have to put the customer first. Who, what's the problem you're solving, who you solve it for? That's the most important thing. And the problem we solve, there are two problems. One of the problems, of course, is the sustainability of the current fleet, which is just not where it needs to be. The other problem is the availability of, you know, purposefully designed vessels for adventure sailing. If you're an adventure sailing operator, your issue is, I don't have access to the right kind of vessel today. I can't just pick up the phone and, I got to go and buy a yacht. That's like a massive investment. And I can't really buy, a yacht like these yachts we're going to build, they'd be millions of pounds. Probably, as an adventure sailing operator, can't buy one of those yachts, and it just commercially won't really make sense. So they end up spending a lot less money because that's what makes sense, but then they end up with a 40-year-old boat. So we're actually solving the problem for them of availability of the right kind of vessel, which is why I always say that, for me, think about, as you said, the functionality is important. Um, but also it's important when I think about how we want to scale up sustainability, because I could build the world's most sustainable yacht, but the question is, how do I convert the entire fleet of yachts? How do I get all of the 6,000 advanced like sailing operators in the world to convert or use net zero yachts in their businesses? To do that, you have to have the right business model. It's not enough to just build a sustainable yacht. You got to build the business model. And so we talk all the time about, everyone asks us about the sustainable, all the sustainable things on the yacht and how sustainable we're going to be. But actually, just as important as that, I always say, is the business model. The business model is, we own those yachts. We're not selling the yachts, Expedition Zero. We're leasing them. That means, Steve, if you fancy running an adventure sailing business, you can pick up the phone to Expedition Zero and we'll lease the yacht to you. We'll lease it to you cheaper than the financing cost of you going and buying a yacht. Suddenly, you're like, why wouldn't I do that? I get a brand new yacht. I don't have to worry about all the maintenance. I don't have to worry about people blowing themselves up because they're leaving the gas on. I get operational efficiency because I don't have to think about, I can only sail so far because then I'm going to run out of diesel, because, there's no fossil fuel on the boat. It's fully generated through natural energy. Like, why wouldn't you take that option? So through the leasing model, what we believe is that we will create, a much bigger ripple through the industry. And, we'll even explore doing things like purchase and lease back. So if you already have a yacht, well, I don't want to use one of your Expedition Zero yachts. I've already got my own, ex Clipper yacht or whatever, challenge yacht. So that's fine. We'll buy the yacht from you. We'll upgrade it to Expedition Zero standard, and we'll lease it back to you. Suddenly you're like, hey, that's cool. I get that headache off my balance sheet. Now I can focus on doing what I want to do, which is take people expedition sailing. And I can do it knowing that I'm not polluting the world as I'm doing it.
Well, and I think that that speaks to a lot of the I think the problem that the sustainability industry has faced is it's the fundamental business model. Like everything has been hype, to be honest, up to a lot of the solutions have been hype. It's been the excitement around this new thing. And then for some reason that business doesn't succeed. And you look at if you actually look at why, it's not a product problem, it's a business model problem. And it's actually solving a problem, not replacing it with another one. And I think your approach in doing it, I mean, I remember when I got to crew on a boat that it was a 34-foot J105, got to learn how to do a little bit more offshore-ish sailing, former America's Cup sailor, like so much experience, cool stuff. And I would go down, the Wednesday night races kind of thing, and I would go rig the boat before everybody got down to the boat. And I remember like it took me a while to do that. And then I started learning about, oh, well, you also have a diver who comes by to clean the bottom of the hull of the boat like a couple times a month to make sure it's all good. And then, oh, you got this other maintenance. Oh, and you're going to have to replace that sail in probably, a year. And then, oh, man, that spinnaker blew. Uh-oh. And then it's just, it's mounting costs when all you want to do at the end of the day is just go sailing. Just want to go sailing. Um, and that's why I love that your approach is more like, hey, no, lease this to people because you're giving them again the inclusivity side. You're giving people the access to go sailing in a more sustainable way.
It's kind of funny because for me, it always felt like it should be like that. In other industries, it is. We talk about like value chain, right? Who owns what in the value chain? So if I came from the world of fast moving consumer goods, tins of deodorant. It might not seem that that's very relevant to sailing, but it is because you know Unilever, they effectively are a sales and marketing organization. Quite often they don't own the factories. Sometimes they do, or they used to, but quite often now they don't own the factory where they produce the products. They're produced by a specialist producer of products. They don't own the trucks that distribute the products. Like, so there are these pockets of specialization, and that's really important because it means that it's more efficient because people are specialized in what they do. And like Unilever as a business is effectively sales and marketing. Like that's what they're really good at. They're brilliant at marketing. And if you compare that to adventure sailing, it's like you've got 6,000 operators, and most of those are small businesses. And by comparison, they have to buy a yacht, finance it, maintain it themselves. They have to think about the trips they're going to run. They have to market those trips. They have to then crew those trips. They have to deal with customer service, all those happy customers, hopefully. You have to be social media experts. They have, like, that's a lot for, probably a husband and wife team or, like a small business to try and manage, especially when it involves owning a yacht, which honestly, as we've just said, is n- not exactly a straightforward asset to own. So it seems totally relevant to me. And this is why I say, even putting aside for one moment the sustainability piece, it it's actually really relevant anyway. It's just a huge pressure that, in my mind, will hold back the kind of growth of adventure sailing because you got to give people the space to feel like I want to take people sailing and I can focus my attention on doing that, making sure that I take people that they're safe, they have an amazing time. Hopefully, I teach them something around the ocean, and I give them this amazing positive experience. That's what you want those sailing operators to focus on. Like you said, I want to go sailing. I don't want to be like, oh my goodness, if I go sailing, like what's gonna, wear and tear and da da da. Like all those things are they're just a hassle. So Expedition Zero, we will not run sailing trips. We did think about that. We were like, we'll have this amazing fleet of yachts. People might phone us up and be like, "Hey, can you organize me a sailing trip?" And I was like, "We're not going to do that." What we might say is, go and talk to Wavy Sail. They're a venture sailing operator. They run trips. We lease them. We'll lease the yacht to them or to another operator. Here's one of the people that use operate our yachts. Go and talk to them because they're the experts in doing that. I don't want to get into operating, like running sailing trips. I want to be building and owning that fleet, making sure that fleet is in A1 condition, the best it can be for the mission that it's going to be used for.
Well, and I think the one thing that I think people forget too is the fact that if you're running everything off of electric, it's quieter. Like if you think about that experience of like when the motor is off and you're sailing, vastly different experience than when you go
Yeah, that,
like
oh, and the heat,
so
like
different.
that, and the heat. I remember that was, yeah, being out on the sea when we did motor a long time, and especially when you're near the tropics. If you were on the bunk next to the engine room, I mean, in a way, it's kind of therapeutic. After a while, it's like puts you to sleep.
Vibrate in the head.
And then someone would open the door to the engine room and check the oil, check the fuel level every hour. And you just this like blast of heat. It's like already 40 degrees in the below decks. And you open the engine room door and it's just like tsunami of heat. Like, yeah, electric will be much nicer.
Well, and what's your favorite part of, I mean, really this whole experience that you've been on? I mean, you transitioned from more, I mean, very much a corporate position to then, you know what, I'm going to go sail around the world. Doesn't quite make it quite around the world because of something affecting it out of your control. And then you're like, you know what, I'm going to do this whole shift and I want to do this. Do you ever check back on that and just go, here's where I was and here's where I am now?
Yeah, because I still talk a lot to people, from my Unilever days, and the funny thing is they were like, "Oh man, it's super cool! You run an adventure sailing business." And I'm like, I'm the guy that like sits in the office and like writes the standard operating procedures, and you know, um, yeah, I do think it feels a bit mad. This is probably not the answer that I should give, but it feels a bit crazy because I do feel like, and I joined the Clipper race, and this is a testament to them, by the way. I want to say that in some ways we're kind of competitors with Clipper, but everyone in the sailing industry is also it's quite family like. I feel that was one of the things I really like. There's quite a lot of support. They actually Clipper very supportive of Wavy Sail when we started the business, I have to say. And we try to help other sailing operators, and that's one of the things that's nice in the sailing community. But yeah, it kind of does feel a bit odd. I went on the Clipper race, and then we started our own adventure sailing business. With like I didn't really that wasn't the master plan. And now we're building yachts, and it's like now we've gone from creating an adventure sailing business to building adventure sailing yachts. Yeah, that's quite an evolution, and I didn't plan that. But it is an evolution. It's a natural evolution. What's been really good, it's and what actually the reason why I love doing now what I'm doing, the people that it has brought me in touch with, it's been challenging, and it's extremely um inspiring. I've had the good fortune through Wavy Sail, like through the skippers that we work with, people like Guy Waits, just does the Golden Globe race, or Jim, who's actually co-founded Expedition Zero with me, who's very humble, but has kind of sailed all around the world, like run yachts all over the place, like just amazing experience from incredible people, and that's that's been and still is the reason for me that for doing it every day. When I look now at the team we have for Expedition Zero, you know, I mean, so many people have put their time in um, willingly. You know, it's not like everyone's doing it because we're all going to become multi-millionaires. That would be nice, but probably, it may not happen. But it's people are doing it because they're really passionate about sailing. They're really passionate about what we're trying to do. Lots of people are being really helpful, and I love that. I love that. It's great to be part of something which is kind of attracting amazing people. It's humbling, actually.
I almost see it as like an extension of being on an expedition. It's you have a team of people and they all kind of rely on each other and you just brought them to the shoreline all to just go back out to sea again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, very much. I mean, it is. It is like being on an expedition, and everyone kind of brings their own expertise. I mean, whether it's like an expertise in building, of course, like Norbert and Marion, or whether it's in operations like Jim, or whether it's me. I mean, in my commercial, I have my background is commercial. I always tell people, I always start by telling people, we were talking to investors, and I always start by telling investors, by the way, I'm not a sailor and I don't know much about sailing. Never got quite worked out whether sometimes they find that a bit odd as a start, as an opener. But it's true. Like, my background is not sailing, but actually I feel like it's in that has enabled me to perhaps come with a different solution than maybe I would have had if I just spent my whole life kind of in the sailing industry, because it's about bringing the kind of transferable skills in, right? So yeah, so we all have our own very different experience and our own contribution to make, and that very much is like being part of a crew on an expedition, like everyone knowing what they do well and being able to work together and create something, create passage.
Yeah. Well, it is also relative. I mean, I would say in comparison to the skippers that you work with, you don't know much about sailing, but to everybody else, you've definitely done quite a large amount of sailing in comparison. So I think that's when you start to get immersed in the world, you just realize it can go deeper and deeper, and there's always people who are way more experienced or way more experts in whatever that is. But that's the beauty of it, though, is because they're experts in that and they're not experts in what you bring to the table. And that's the coolest part, is like it all just comes together into something where you know you're creating a yacht that's first of its kind, a new class. And you don't see that a lot in sailing. Like, you see a lot of new classes kind of trying to start, and then more of it's just can we make a different boat design that might be more exciting for the public to buy other than a laser or something like that. But you're actually fundamentally trying to shift what yacht design could look like.
Yeah, that's true. um that is true, and but I think it comes back, as something we talked about earlier, which is, um you can only do that if you bring lots of different people to. You need lots of skills to do that, and none of us have all the skills to, you know, like, I definitely don't have the skills to build Expedition Zero, on my own or with Jim. Like, it needs lots of people, and it comes back to, I think, mm, that ability to say, you know what, like, don't try to be something that you're not. Don't try to, you know, do stuff when you're not the expert. Like, recognize people for their expertise, and have high trust in people. Something that sailing has taught me about, trusting each other, right? Recognizing each other's skills. You know, if I'm honest, when I was younger, I probably struggled with that a bit. I was like, when I was, I don't know, brand manager or something at Unilever, you'd be like, yeah, I know all about everything. Like, those sales guys, they don't know anything, and I could do the job better than that. Like, now I'm like, well, I know what I know, and 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 then I look at Jim, and it's like, wow, that's kind of an inspirational person to look at, or David on Wavy, or these people that we meet, as I said, I just kind of see it as like, this is a really, I'm very fortunate to be involved um, in this project, because I think it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I also think, we have to make a difference. That I'm not knocking anyone who's trying to be sustainable, but there is a lot of like not half-hearted attempts, but a lot of kind of, this will be good enough. You know, customers want sustainable solutions. I've got 10% sustainable materials in my boat. Great. You know, like, well, that is good, but it's not good enough. And I think that's just that kind of, how do we go all the way to the end here? How we take this right to where we need to go? And it's not a competitive thing. Like, if anyone out there, I mean, anyone listening, they're like, I have the answer. You guys shouldn't be doing, this kind of electric propulsion. Like, fine, like, come to talk to us. Like, I would much rather have a solution than have someone else come and say, you could have made that better. I'd say, great, let's join our team and let's make it better. But at least let's start.
Yeah. I think that's such a mindset of, honestly, getting out in the ocean. And I think one of the things that you learn when you're either at sea or under the water or in a huge wave, whatever that is, you learn that the ocean is vastly powerful, nature's vastly powerful, and you realize that you only have so much power as one person. And that's where I think that when you start to apply that mindset across the board, it's the collaboration, it's the symbiotic relationships that you can form with the community of people who can work towards a common goal and actually make something happen. I think that's where the needle effectively moves, because, I mean, to your point, it's not to knock anybody, but just throwing an electric motor into the same construction that's always been isn't moving it that much. It's a step, but it's not a fundamental shift. And I think that what you guys are doing, it's a fundamental shift, and I think it's huge. If they were to want to get involved with you and message you and say, hey, let's improve that electric system, or let's look at it closer, how do people kind of get in touch with either Wavy Sail, Expedition Zero, I mean, go on an adventure? What does it look like?
So, well, first of all, they can email me, Andrew at expeditionzero.co.uk. But yeah, I mean, I'm very open to people who want to get in touch with us. And actually, specifically, we're looking at this moment. There are three kind of things, I guess, opportunities, if I can say that. One is that the first vessel, we're going to sail through the Northwest Passage, and we have places available on that trip, which 6 places. So this is not like a sales pitch, but well, it kind of is. It kind of is. Do you want to come on the Northwest Passage?
I would love to,
Yeah.
seriously.
So anyone that wants to come on the Northwest Passage, go to wavysail.com. There's stuff about that, how they can get involved and apply. I mean, it's a big trip though. That's a real expedition, and it's on this amazing yacht. So, but if the Northwest Passage is something any of the listeners want to explore, we've spent a considerable amount of time planning what that trip looks like, and that will probably take place in 2026. But then, in terms of Expedition Zero, we're looking, for technology partners, uh, you know, um, really around propulsion and around electrical systems. There's so much work being done, and there are some largest companies, but a lot of the best work is being done, with smaller companies, really specialized. And I think the Expedition Zero, think of it as a platform. We It's not about being ultra experimental because, to be honest, this is a commercial sailing vessel. So, you know, kind of, hey, we've had a kind of idea. I've got a prototype. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but can I put it in your boat? Probably. I'm like, well, look, we're going to have paying customers on this boat, so you know, we need to be pretty confident. But I think, like, for a lot of those technologies where people, we've got prototype, like the actual materials that we're using. Innovation Yachts. They've built a yacht, 60-foot yacht in this material. They've taken it to the Arctic. It's like, we know it works. It's not it's not a risk, in that sense. It's just about, now we need to commercialize it. And I think there'll be lots of technology partners in that same space. Like, we've built a prototype, we've got it certified, we know that it works, but we need to give it, we want to give it voice. Already putting it onto an Expedition Zero yacht could be a good way of doing that. Um, so, sailing it through the Northwest Passage. Like, so, sure, I would love to hear from technology partners who are out there, that we may not have picked up. And then the obvious one, of course, is investors. It's really interesting. We're talking to investors. We pretty much have everything ready to go, and we still are looking for investors to finish the investment round. Um, and what's very interesting is the people who are we're talking to. It's kind of interesting. There's kind of a whole bunch of people, individuals who've come, who are just really passionate about the sustainability angle and making a big difference. And then there are some funds that we're talking to, a bit more corporate. But there's opportunities to get involved. If people want to get involved and be part of the business, they can definitely do that. But it's Andrew at expeditionzero.co.uk.
Well, and I think on the investment side, that's very interesting because I don't know. I think a lot of people consider investment into, investment into startups, right, is always a risk, as a lot of people talk about. And you have a lot of companies that do fizzle out and they don't make it. But when you think about what you guys are doing, I don't know. I just think I think about it more in like the Formula One aspect, or a high end type of technology investment, because the cars we're driving today was a Formula One car 15 years ago. Like that, that's where the fundamental technology comes from. And that to me that's the opportunity for a lot. It's not just, hey, let's take this through the Northwest Passage, which is awesome.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, well, actually, I know because we already had someone. We already had someone phone us and say, "I know you're going to lease this out to sailing operators, but like I want to buy one." It's like, and I and that's great. But the thing is that, um, see, I look at it like this: that you've got to. So we get these yachts out. Obviously, the launch customer will wavy sail, but then hopefully with other sailing operators as well, we'll start to use them. That people, these are people who are really passionate about sailing, who are going to go on board these yachts. They're going to be 10, 20 people a week, maybe, going on these yachts, on each yacht. And a proportion of those people are going to go on board this yacht and they're going to say, I do want to buy a yacht. And when I buy a yacht, where do I buy a yacht that's built out of this material? Where do I build it? Where do I buy a yacht that meets these criteria? It's not because, and this again, for any potential investors, close your ears now, because this is not the message you guys want to hear. But like, it's not because Expedition Zero has to be the only person to ever sell you a yacht and becomes a $1 trillion company, right? It's because Expedition Zero needs to set the standard. That means people come on board the yacht and say, "Oh wow, like I never really thought about the environmental impact of sailing, but actually, you know what? When I go and buy a yacht, I'm going to demand that actually it is a net zero boat. Frankly, whether that's a rowing boat or a super yacht, it has to be about setting the benchmark." And sure, I would love that Expedition Zero, sells you a boat, but it's more important to drive the change. That's really what will happen. So we will focus on commercial expedition sailing, those adventure sailing business at the beginning, certainly, but definitely, there's spillover into the wider sailing community.
And where's your favorite place to enjoy nature?
Wow. So, I should say somewhere, on a coastline, I guess. But the weird thing is, um, I'm very fortunate. We have a house in the Jura Mountains in France. It's just a beautiful part of the world. But um, and I love going there. But I love going there because we don't have any Wi-Fi and we don't have any, um, we don't have any connection. It's quite a good place to go and say that you're doing remote work. Like there's no mobile phone signal, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no internet, and there's lots of mountains and nature, and I find it very therapeutic to be there. It's kind of like a place of space, but of course, it's also true that of course, I love. Um, I think my favorite place. I talk a lot about St. Helena Island, and we sail there. It's a bit the same. It's an island out in the middle of the South Atlantic. It's 4,000 people on the island. Um, it's just the most amazingly friendly place where you walk. If you go and walk out on the island, people will stop the car and ask you, be like, "Where are you going?" And they'll give you a lift. Like it's that kind of place. Um, and I love that because I love the people and I love the friendliness and the warmth and that willingness to help each other as well. You know, we have like strong communities.
Andrew, thank you for joining the podcast. Thanks for talking Expedition Zero, wavy sail. Thanks for honestly educating people on, I don't know, the value of just getting out there and going for something. I think that's a lesson in and of itself. It's not just what you guys are doing in Expedition Zero, but it's your journey as well. And honestly, I hope that everybody who's listening is becoming an Expedition Zero sign up to go through the Northwest Passage. It's on my bucket list for sure. Seems incredible. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening to the GOAT podcast. You are the reason why we exist and why we show up every single day.
I've spent too many years being against stuff, and I've found now that it's a little bit easier and a little bit more fun to be for something.
How are we going to power the world? How are we going to build the world? How are we going to feed the world?
Company isn't just good or bad, black or white. Usually there's a lot more there, a lot more that they don't know.
It's actually about what you do in your daily life every day can make a huge difference.
Give this episode a share. Join our GOAT community, but most importantly, go spend some time in nature because you might find it a meaningful reminder of the amazing place that we get to call home. I'm Steve Cassingham, and we'll see you next time.